Hi to those that have joined us for today's webinar. My name is Jeff Wilson with Verusen, the Chief Revenue Officer, and we're going to wait just another minute or so for others to join, get off other Zoom calls. I'll be getting ready to go here in another minute. Well, we will get started. As people continue to join, we'll start getting through introductions as well. But again, I wanted to thank everybody for joining us today. We certainly hope you and your families are staying well during the COVID-19 situation. It looks like things are starting to get back to a little bit to normal. That's going to take a while, but thank you for joining. As you know, today we're going to be highlighting one of our customers and one of the country's largest consumer goods companies. That will be Georgia-Pacific today. And we're happy to have a member of that team join us, Rachna Neelakaval. She's joined us from the GP team, and I'll let her introduce herself in a moment. And she will be sharing some of the thoughts and experiences with one of their recent innovation projects with us at Verusen. But first, I'm going to quickly go through the agenda for today, and then we'll get on with their introductions for the call. So we are going to go through over the next half hour a little bit of the use case summary that Rachna will highlight herself, and then we're going to have a little bit of a Q&A conversation with both Rachna and Paul Noble, our CEO, and then we'll provide everybody with a little bit of a view into the solution itself and finish up with any questions and answers at the end. So with that, I'll let Paul and Rachna introduce themselves.
Go ahead, Rachna. I'll let you lead the way.
Okay. So hello, everyone. I'm Rachna Neelakaval, and I'm an Innovation Fellow at Point A, which is an supply chain innovation center founded by Georgia-Pacific and has around 45 different member companies that include large corporations like Georgia-Pacific, Delta, Microsoft, as well as startups like Verusen. So I've been with Koch Industries for over 3 years now. I started off in the procurement group at Georgia-Pacific and moved to supply chain innovation at Invista, one of the sister companies. And then for over the last 9 months, I've been with Point A as an innovation fellow, working with the different members of Point A ecosystem to solve all the complex supply chain problems of the future.
Thanks, Rachna. And I'm Paul Noble, founder and CEO of Verusen. And we are, as many of you know, a supply chain intelligence company based here in Supply Chain City, Atlanta, Georgia, at the ATDC and Tech Square. And over the past couple of years, we've been developing some purpose-built technology specific to the materials management space with a strong specificity on indirect and MRO. And really, the issues that we saw and are solving for include system disparity, processes outside of the system that make things very difficult for organizations to manage data, inventory, and or data and its relation to inventory and procurement of those materials at scale across the globe. So thank you for taking the time to join us here today as we share one of our most recent use cases with a great partner of ours, Georgia Pacific, and give you a little peek into one of the most recent releases of our product. So thank you. Look forward to the conversation.
Perfect. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Roshna. So with that, I thought it would be good to start with a little summary by Roshna on the project as she and her team went into it. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the details in the Q&A portion, but I'll hand it over to Roshna to highlight some of that on the next couple of slides.
Yeah, no, thanks, Jeff. So for those of you who don't know Georgia Pacific, as Jeff mentioned, GP is one of the world's leading manufacturers and distributors of tissue, pulp, and paper. You may recognize some of these brands and as well as use them. So brands like Brawny paper towels, we have Quilted Northern, Angel Soft, Dixie cups and tableware, etc. GP also has a presence in the construction business as well as aerospace, mining, and facilities management. And so GP has operations all around the world. And as you can see on the slide, we have more than 120 different plants, 7 different divisions, and operate out of 30 states in the United States. So sometime around last year, GP came forward with the problem that they were facing in carrying excessive and growing amount of inventory in those 120 different plants that were not necessarily the right inventory, as evidenced by facility downtime, expedites, as well as millions of dollars in annual write-offs. So GP had a team of like 5 analysts that were assigned to identifying and optimizing their MRO strategy. So GP coming to point A with this opportunity around MRO optimization, and we were doing some discovery work with them around the specific issues they were facing around MRO inventory management that people in teams had been trying to tackle for their entire careers. And we had Verusen meet with GP and do a deep dive with them. And pretty quickly, it became apparent to the folks on the inventory team at Georgia Pacific that Verusen had a very unique offering in this space, and that it was different from the other approaches they had kind of tried out in the past. So if you go on to the next slide, one of the key things that GP and the Verusen teams kind of work together is to complete both the operational as well as the data discoveries in the first 30 days. So they kind of laid out this 90-day plan, both the GP team as well as the Verusen team, and kicked it off with the discovery work. And pretty quickly, within the first 45 to 90 days, GP was actually able to verify tens of millions of dollars in opportunities, which was super exciting. And so if you go on to the next slide, some of the outcomes of this proof of concept that was run with GP was MRO inventory that was optimized for cost avoidance as well as maximizing the working capital. There's the data harmonization or duplicate verification, where duplicate material was verified and identified to stop procurement and provide trusted data to the other systems. And finally, was the ability for any user at any of the plants, in sourcing and otherwise, to allow them to have an easy access across the network for any material. So this kind of tells you the location, the full detail of the material, as well as highlight if that material is actually a duplicate across these different multiple EE systems. If you go on the next slide, as mentioned, digital transformation is a huge part of GP's vision, and GP is actually the first wave of optimizing their material inventory and getting to a clean trust data foundation. Going forward, they do have a couple of different projects in flight to kind of accelerate the vision. So, the team is kind of going after a phased approach, starting off with proof of concept, experimentation, to moving into a full-blown scale project across the different plants.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you for the highlights. I think it'd be good for the audience. Now, we'll do a little bit of Q&A about the project, a little bit more detail. So with that, you mentioned the current state and some of the things that the team had been looking at in the past. As you were evaluating Verusen, the types of things you were looking for, your team was looking for to solve, and what was the particular things that made the difference relative to your approach, and what were some of the benefits as to why you did that?
Yeah, so as mentioned earlier, GP had come to Point A with this opportunity, and we were doing some discovery work with them early last year around these specific issues around MRO inventory management. Again, people had been trying to solve this for decades, and that's when we kind of had Verusen meet with GP and kind of do a deep dive with them pretty quickly. The team at GP was like, okay, this is unique, and they were ready to run a proof of concept. So that's really how the project-based engagement began at GP, and it was primarily through that discovery work. In terms of benefits, I think some things that are very unique to Verusen's approach versus some of the other solution providers we were looking at the time was that it was primarily like a software as a service model and at a very low cost of entry compared to the other companies. As well as you could experiment pretty quickly at low risk. You could get your results pretty quickly within the 90 days as laid out in the project plan. And it was not a very heavy lift from an IT standpoint. So it's not like you're going in and kind of set up like a new software platform where you've got to have IT department involved in either. So all those types of elements just really made it pretty easy and relatively low risk for the decision and effective to engage at that proof of concept level.
Oh, good. Thank you. So next questions for both of you. Thought I'd just get a couple thoughts on the current environment. Around as we think about safety stock and inventory management, we're seeing some headlines that are kind of dividing relative to stock outs, and in some instances you're seeing excess inventory. So what are your takes on in regard to inventory intelligence as we come through the COVID situation? Paul, I'll start with you.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, it's been interesting because obviously demand signals are important to managing inventory and having the right product at the right place at the right time. And whether you're talking specifically finished goods or in terms of what we're all starting to stock up as a consumer base, I know specifically related to GP in the toilet paper space, it's a popular topic of discussion in supply chain. It's different than our historical values. So production is different, demand signals are different, and being able to deal with that in a as much of a proactive perspective is important. So it really starts with understanding that foundational data that Rachna mentioned earlier in her explanation of why GP felt this was such an important aspect and why we've kind of developed this purpose-built technology. And it's something we've been developing over the past couple of years to really look at the core problems of systems, processes, and data's relation, as I mentioned earlier, relation to inventory and procurement, and make it a living, breathing thing. Because the traditional approach has always been, I can't really optimize my inventory or procure better until I clean my data. And so that is a ever-going process. So that's one of our specific points from a mission perspective is going in using existing data and driving results from quote unquote dirty data, right? So without being reactive, there are a lot of decisions and data that's managed outside of the system as well. And that really puts organizations in a difficult spot when something changes in the market like it has during the pandemic, or resources change or realign. So getting that knowledge across every decision that's made is really, really important. So combining those two is a really important part of our service and laying that foundation quickly and early. But the same is relevant down the various nodes of the supply chain. So as we're looking at it from a current environment perspective, there's something where companies like Georgia Pacific started that process before the pandemic. And now we had that foundation laid so that as demand signals change, production changes, and the need to support that changes, they're already prepared to begin shifting that across the network and understand those decisions and what they will need today versus what has historically happened.
Rachna, over to you. Any response?
Yeah, no, just to kind of piggyback off of what Paul just said, we are in 2020 and we know we have some amazing technology out there that can solve for what these, supply chain managers have been trying to tackle for decades. But the problem a lot of times is that, large companies at times are not exposed to or aware that these technologies exist. And if they do, they don't know how to go about it. So we believe, like at GP, we were like, okay, this begins with experimentation. That's truly, honestly, how you learn. I mean, a lot of companies can spend like a lot of time trying to develop, points of view about how to go about doing things and benchmarking different solutions and companies, etc. But until you actually do something, you don't really know how it applies to you. So we at Point A, we spend a lot of time finding out like new emerging technologies that are out there and connecting VCs and investor communities.
So Rachna, could you maybe just elaborate on, you talk about experimentation and trying things. Could you elaborate on that and maybe the how GP is thinking about their approaches and has anything changed in the strategies, given the situation now of how you look to innovate and try these new projects out?
So, like in the last few years, when you think about like Coke Industries as a whole, of which Georgia Pacific and Vista, Molex are members, they have embraced innovation and transformation as a part of their principles. And so this is also true for a lot of different corporations right now, and especially now, amidst this pandemic, it's more important than ever for businesses. And, businesses probably have also changed for good, and it's critical traditional supply chains transform to digital supply chains. So when we think about new innovative opportunities, more so than dollars, it's about like allocating resources, specifically people resources, and what it does to take to stand up a project as well as an experiment like this. So it's overwhelming because most traditional methods do take significant amount of on-premise engagement, significant amount of time to get data ready and to get all of these systems created. And that's true, specific because we have a number of different ERP systems that needed to be integrated. So I think one of the things that we discovered and learned is the importance of communicating that this is a high value, low effort, low risk engagement, and then can be done remote. So that was a big value add. And we don't see the thing away, in the next couple of months really, because of the pandemic and how things have changed. I think it's going to change the mindset of buyers and stakeholders in the corporate level of what's possible in technology and how they should be looking at new ways to solve these problems. So really, speed is key. And speed to value is key. Resources, high value effort, low risk have been prominent things that we've been discussing in our four walls about, how to drive experimentation and innovation quickly at big corporations.
No, that's good point, and obviously advice for how to get things done quickly. So just a last wrap-up question, and then we'll pause for some questions from any of the audience possible. But so with the limited approach, the proof of concept, can you just, each of you just describe how you go about scoping one of these pilots? How does your team lay out, different, maybe the waves of how you think about expanding beyond the pilot? Respectful to GP and the numbers, Rachna, we don't need to really share too much, but, just curious on the POC scope and how success was determined.
Sure, I'll start. As we look and sit down, scope out challenges, related to systems and processes and limiting change management, really every organization is very, very consistent and similar because at the core, they're running legacy ERP systems. It's not a lack of desire of what they want to do, it's the systems causing many of the issues and the inability to scale. So using GP as an example, running multiple instances off of SAP ECC and a couple of different EAM systems to support asset management, all supporting across those 120 plants and 7 business units. So without a connected set of data and understanding or view of the MRO materials, the data sets, as we were looking at it, are demonstrably different. Different naming conventions, somewhat differing stocking strategies depending on the business units that are rolling up into those EAM systems and when they were acquired. And that's really the key, is our unique ability, again, to look across those different data sets and find synergies without cleaning data. And that's, goes back to the speed to value. All plants, not just a couple, looking at the entire macro perspective of the materials that support those facilities, and the training the system on how those materials have historically moved, and not just over the last period of months. So taking this scenario, in the first wave, we bring high value quickly with little to no effort from GP's team. Simple extracts, specific extracts out of their multiple systems, and begin identifying, both on a data perspective across the entire network, as well as identifying inventory savings and verifying those opportunities and recommendations, which we'll show you in the demo, for operations and sourcing, and then procurement teams. Also, we haven't gotten to really how we were able to do this so quickly. We are using, now that the technology is available, a platform that combines multiple AI models to do a lot of this heavy lifting. GP was spending up to 50% of their time analyzing this information to drive results. And like every organization, trying to do that makes it very difficult to scale beyond kind of isolated instances or specific categories of materials. And so looking at it holistically and using AI for speed, scale, and accuracy, it allows us to quickly move through massive amounts of data, begin the knowledge transfer process, and verify and confirm specific pieces of information that are relevant, and allows the system to learn from it. So taking that feedback directly from plant operations and sourcing teams and applying that back into the models across the data sets really helps us verify a tremendous amount of opportunities quickly. And it's been really great to work with the GP team, very mature in how they manage this part of their business. And we were excited to, take on the challenge as a partner with them and go in and enhance and look forward to the many things that we can accomplish together across GP and across Koch Industries.
Yeah, and just to kind of add on to that, Paul, I mean, it's been exciting to work with Verusen as well. And, we started off with GP, but also went on to work with around the same project. So it has been an interesting journey at Koch Industries. And just in general, when we think about, bringing on new technologies and thinking of innovation and experimentation across industries, failures are just as important, if not more important, than successes. And, also accepting that we can't always do it all ourselves, right? And there is a certain amount of risk involved, but it's kind of, also important in thinking, how do we mitigate risk? So because oftentimes, you spend a lot of time, money, resources, and spend an entire year experimenting, and then only to realize that, oh, well, that's that much opportunity cost that's gone. It did not work out. So going ahead with a short couple-week MVP. So I think this was 9 to 12 weeks of work that went in. And then coming out of it, and then, it's quickly, success or fail. And then in this case, it worked out good. We realized millions of dollars in opportunities within the optimization space. So it's been an exciting journey, and excited about what's in store going ahead.
No, that's great. Thank you. And we certainly want to be respectful of the time. We know we've got about 5 minutes left of our time. And I mentioned we would take some questions here after the conversation. In lieu of that, I'd like to get to at least a few of the demo screens so that everybody could maybe, if they're interested in seeing that, then we'll handle the questions right after that as quickly as we can for those that want to hang on and raise their hand via the Zoom Q&A. But I did have one question pop up that I think we can answer pretty quickly to Rachna that came through. What were the kind of maybe 2 or 3 key KPIs that were looked at prominently as you kind of went through the proof of concept and moved past that?
Yeah, so a couple things. There was the matter of opportunity cost in terms of how people were spending their time. Up until then, it took a couple of hours for folks to track these different materials, or they just went ahead and treated like they were unique materials. So now they provided them visibility across these different systems. So that was one. There was also just inventory reduction, right? Like as discovered more and more materials that were actually duplicates, it means that this need not, this MRO material need not be used as insurance in these different ones. So those were kind of the different metrics that were used in measuring what the value is that was captured out of this project.
No, thank you. So we're going to transition very quickly here, show you a few screens, and obviously happy to engage at any depth with anyone post the call here. But Paul, you want to describe just a few of the screens that we'll run through over the next couple of minutes?
What you're seeing here is a representation of what a user would see at a plant level or a centralized planning level within an organization. So taking this example, two different data sets, 2 different stocking strategies, and harmonizing those into the Verusen platform and allow you to take a dive into specific recommendations. So we're taking all of that analysis off the plate, all of the system challenges off your plate, and presenting them in a fashion that allows you to make decisions. So these recommendation cards, what you're seeing here is the ability to see what you currently have on hand, and based on the information that's in the system, what Verusen recommends. The key point to this is that if the recommendation looks good with all of these kind of dynamic lead times and all the information that typically goes into a decision, you simply hit agree. And that is recorded, and the system learns from that decision. Now, equally as important, as we mentioned earlier, 80% of the decisions or the info that goes into these stocking decisions and procurement decisions lives outside of the system. So it's very important to build trust with people at the field level to add information to the system. So if I don't agree, I can disagree because I know something else, and I can disagree with the recommendation. Many times it's usually somewhere in the middle, an overall benefit, but that confirmation is important to say, no, I believe it's this safety stock for this standard reason. And any other additional information can be typed in free text that we use natural language processing to apply to that material as we go. So as the information builds, you'll continue to get to apply this feedback and really get all the information you need here to go through these decisions and drive results. And from a timing perspective, in conjunction to that, so we're verifying these on a single plant basis to start, but that's building the network across every decision. Now, at the same time, whether it's an MDM group or a procurement team that manages master data, we're presenting and looking across these data sets within and across things that aren't typically able to be surfaced from a duplication perspective. So as you see here, 2 different material numbers, where are they stocked, what are their costs, what system are they in, and where did you get them from? And you can certainly dive deeper into that with other information that exists within the system and the same type of actions. Do you agree that this is a duplicate? Do you disagree, or are you unsure? Does that need to go to someone else in the organization in terms of a decision to be made, whether it's engineering or another department? So as we move through these and these verifications happen, both good, both verified and or agreed with and disagreed with, we look at the effect that that has on the inventory recommendations, where those materials are used on a single plant basis as well as a multiple plant basis. And this is building the foundation. So we start streamlining the material master catalog, and then can build intelligence and alerts off of this for you to say, oh, these have been confirmed, there's a price difference, let me look at that. And those are features that we're building off with all of the complex information we're combining, and that's doing the behind the scenes work. So a lot of hard work has gone into simplifying this from a data perspective. And like we said, releasing features about every 2 weeks that improves this process based on our roadmap and feedback from our early customers and customers in general. The additional piece that has become very valuable is search. So as you're making decisions and as you're as we're looking at optimization opportunities, there's a lot of manual entry that goes in that makes that difficult to manage and scale. So we've improved search out of systems significantly, where I can go in and simply type either words or numbers for material perspective. And because of how we're training the data, it significantly reduces the material creation process, where you are ingesting, because you can now find that material and order from self rather than procuring from a specific new vendor. So all of these combined, and there's, kind of going through those waves. Wave one being, we've mismanaged this, not because we want to, but because our systems don't allow us. Over the last, decade or so, cost reduction and immediate verification on cost avoidance. And then as we look out across the network, that begins what we're looking ahead to, is aligning with your key suppliers and some really cool features and intelligence that will be able to continue to offload working capital, continue to drive sourcing in more real time by trading real-time demand signals and some things as we work towards our vision of the intelligent connected supply chain. So I know we're over time, so I'll stop there. And of course, we are available to go more in depth individually with you, your team, and your organization, and schedule a call anytime in the next few weeks. So I'll pause there. Are there any questions, Jeff?
Yeah, thank you, Paul. There was a couple. One was, who are the typical users of the platform?
Yeah, so it varies by organization, and we've built the platform in a way that, since we're combining optimization as well as data, a data solution, that we've kind of thrown out the traditional obstacles and hurdles there. So from a data perspective, MDM is there, procurement MDM, or just master data management as a user. Also, plant personnel. So sometimes if you're decentralized, plant personnel are making these decisions, they will sign up. Procurement personnel will be users, obviously leadership of those organizations, as well as centralized planners in some organizations, where Georgia Pacific is an example of that. So because we're combining different things, our optimization is different because we allow that feedback. We're sending intelligent data and understood data into the optimization models. we've kind of we've changed the paradigm of the business model, which Rachna mentioned earlier around low cost. We unlimited records, unlimited users, unlimited facilities. It's really a simple pricing structure based on your architecture and the systems that we're looking at, which has been very favorable in demonstrating an ROI within the first 90 days that pays for the service for the first year.
Another question for you, Paul. Do you need to perform any pre-processing of the long text descriptions prior, as you break into the subcomponents, or how do you handle that?
We don't, no. So we'll take, using natural language processing, we've trained millions of parts. We take the data as it exists in the character limited description as well as the long text, and are able to utilize that information as well as what you have and what you don't have, right? Because it's never perfect. It's often abbreviated. And again, therein lies the challenge. So being able to utilize that and understand it, we do not have to do any modifications to the data. We have specific asks in how we get the data. I make it pretty simple for that, kind of aligning again with Gartner's magic quadrant of supply chain projects: high value, low effort, low risk, and even in certain scenarios, no risk, to make it as simple as possible anytime, but specifically during the pandemic, to get up and running quickly, remotely, and efficiently.
No, thank you. And by the way, I know we've run over and we had another question here, but we're happy to answer any questions anytime. So just email us. We'll follow up with certainly the PowerPoint deck and a recording to today's webinar for everybody. So thank you again for that. One other question for those still on. To either one of you, Rachna or Paul, kind of what are some of the next steps after you identify some of these duplicates, some of the options available to take action on those?
Yeah, I can answer. In essence of time, I can answer that. From a duplication, so we begin flagging these duplicates and combining the inventory for those, or the demand for those certain parts. What we're working towards is in a UI that we're going to be releasing is selecting a golden record. But for change management purposes, we don't eliminate the duplicates. We just flag those that have been confirmed and immediately look at the procurement and inventory business value output of those. But the flags are then able to be reviewed, exported, and streamlined as we work towards a golden record over a quick period of time.
Okay, great, thanks. I think that was the last of the questions today. But just a last thank you to everybody for joining. Thank you for the extended time. For those of you who stayed with us, as mentioned, we'll send everything back to you as follow-up. And if you have questions for Rachna, we'll include her contact information as well for those wanting to reach out to her separately. So thank you everybody for joining, and stay well. Bye-bye.
Thank you.